Today we are at the seminar for addressing the market hog trailer biosecurity challenges. We've got three great presenters today, so glad you could attend. The first one, we're going to start with Dr. Cesar Corzo from the University of Minnesota, providing the characterization of market hog trailer contamination rates at harvest plants. Dr. Corzo is an associate professor at the University of Minnesota, where he holds the Leman Chair in Swine Health and Productivity and the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Project Director. He holds a DVM from Universidad de La Salle in Colombia and an MS Master's from University of Guelph and a PhD from University of Minnesota. Dr. Corzo has previously worked with PIC in Elanco, and I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Corzo for a while, so welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. We will take questions at the end of each presentation, so about 2 or 3, and then we'll go on to the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beckman, for that kind introduction, and good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here today and for enduring this very long Leman conference. I hope you're learning lots, and that's the whole point of this presentation. So as Dr. Beckman said, we have been working together for a little while now on different areas, and one of the areas that we're working on right now is trailers and understanding contamination and recontamination. But most importantly, I want to highlight that this project started with one main question, and it's if a pig with an ASF infection gets to a plant, what's the disaster like from a dissemination perspective? In other words, the plant will get contaminated, right, as they process that carcass, but also, is the plant going to serve as a super spreader? In other words, is the plant going to be contaminating other trailers, right? So because we didn't want to do that with ASF, of course, we said, let's use some endemic pathogens to try to calculate and understand that, right? So I don't think I need to preach to the choir here, but everybody knows that today, of course, all these harvest plants are pretty much receiving thousands and thousands of trailers in which there's thousands and millions of pigs being unloaded, right? I don't think I need to tell you that. Now, the important thing that I need to tell you is that we do not have that many estimates as far as how often we contaminate trailers. As simple as that, right? The only one that we have there that has been quite objective is the one that Dr. Jim Lowe did in 2013 as PED was emerging in the United States. And that was a large collaboration with multiple plants throughout the United States and multiple people, and that was able to give us an idea of what was happening at the very early stages of that epidemic. That gave us a 5.2% of contaminated trailers. In other words, 5.2% of the trailers that arrived clean left dirty, right? So we thought, okay, so it's coming, right? So the disaster is coming. But today we don't know exactly what's happening with PRRS, with Seneca, with coronaviruses, right? Given that all of those have been endemic for a little while, right? So it's a different scenario. So our approach was pretty simple. We said, let's just go with basics. Let's just start with the basics. Let's just approach one plant. Let's see if they want to collaborate. And let's just assume that we have no knowledge as far as the prevalence of contamination, right? That event. So we thought, let's estimate a 50%, right? That 50%, what does that mean? In numbers, it's 380 something trailers that we needed to test. So we thought, if we want to try to understand seasonality, we need to spread those throughout the year. So we thought, okay, that's not complicated. That'll make it harder on the individuals sampling the trailers. Therefore, we just divided that by 26. It gave us a 14.8 or 7, I can't remember. So we rounded up to 15. So we said, let's go and collect samples from 15 trailers every other week for 12 months. Very simple. The way we thought about this is we can go with swabs. We can try to collect swabs, and that's an easy sample. However, we wanted to increase the chances of detection, right? And for that, we said, how can we get the best sample from a trailer that has 170, 180, 260 pound hogs? That's tricky, right? We would love to do that, but then there's going to be some safety concerns, right? So we thought, okay, let's just use a Swiffer that is going to be moistened with minimum essential media. So for those of you that do not know what that is, it's just the media that the virologists and the labs use to maintain some cells alive so that we can try to isolate viruses, right? So we call that minimum essential media. So it's pretty simple. You just put in a baggie, a plastic baggie, the Swiffer, the media, and then you make sure that that Swiffer is moistened enough. As the trailer, let me see if as the trailer backs up, the driver will get off, he'll just put his PPE, he'll walk through the door, and then we'll just pretty much harass them. I think that's the best word. If they say, yes, you're okay collecting the sample from my trailer, as soon as they open that door, we say, okay, first sample to collect is the dock, the area in front of the trailer, that's where the pigs will land first. We'll switch gloves, and then we'll collect a 1 by 1 foot area from that last compartment in the trailer, right? And then we'll just switch gloves and wait until the pigs have been unloaded and repeat that process only from the trailer. We will squeeze that fluid, we'll put that fluid in Falcon tubes, and then we'll send that to the University of Minnesota Diagnostic Lab for testing, right? PCR testing. I have to make a parenthesis here, and we have also received some funding to attempt virus isolation and viability PCR. We are just waiting to complete sample collection so that we can start running those tests, right? So I'm not going to show any of that data today because it's non-existent. So you remember that I said we harass drivers. I'm kind of exaggerating, but we just pretty much asked them, would you be interested? Of course, after introducing ourselves, we also had to get some UMN Institutional Review Board clearance for this because it's kind of, they always ask us to make sure that this is not a human subject project, right? So in this case, it was not because we were not asking for names or phone numbers or samples, but we were asking them, right, questions. So they needed to review, so we got the clearance. So the first thing we do is, hey, this is my name. I'm not USDA. I'm a University of Minnesota employee. I'm conducting this project. Would you be interested in helping us out? That's when, if they say yes, my student, who is the one leading this project, Lucas Ferreira, which I should have said that at the beginning, my student and myself, we start a race. In other words, with our English, we need to complete all that survey that you say there, and that's why I say a 2 to 3 minute survey in which we want to ask all these questions, right? And again, it's just checking the boxes. Checking the boxes, very simple. Where are you coming from? Was the trailer clean? Do you haul cattle? What's your destination after you unload pigs? So very general questions. Again, we have only 2-3 minutes, and the plan said, does not slow us down. So that's the whole purpose of this, right? We're trying not to slow down the plant, and we're just gonna be checking the boxes. At the same time, once we do that initial questionnaire, we collect our samples, we just get out of the way, pigs are being unloaded. During that process, that's where we're gonna be observing. What is the driver wearing? Boots, coveralls, work gloves, surgical gloves. How many times does the driver get off the trailer and gets back on? How many plant employees have to get on the trailer to go and help with DOAs or non-ambulatory pigs? So we do that kind of observation as well. So that's another portion of the survey. So up until now, you can start imagining how much data we're generating with every single visit. Now, as of today, we're happy to report that after a little delay, we have completed 21 out of 26 sampling events, right? Actually, tomorrow, Lucas will be going to the plant and collecting the 22nd set of samples. So that'll put us up to 330 trailers. So we're getting there, right? So remember, this started in November last year. We have talked to 147 drivers. Again, this has been a process. At the very beginning, some of them were hesitant to talk to us, mainly because we were wearing Tyvek, right? Everybody was wearing their own uniforms. Secondly, and I have to accept it, our accent may not be very inviting in some cases, right? But as time went by, we talked to each other on a name-by-name basis, right? And we ask about our families, and we ask about the weather, and we ask about their jobs. It's people that want to collaborate with us, right? Because we had to put our names and our institution or our type so that the new drivers feel comfortable around us. What have we found? So this is the doc. I don't think this is surprising to anybody. This should not be surprising to anybody. The thing is that we didn't have any estimates, right? And again, this is PCR positive samples of the 314 trailers that we have been able to, trailers and drivers that we have been able to interact with, right? Not surprising, lots of viruses at the dock, right? The one that is starting to get surprising is this one, right? This is one that it could be interpreted in many different ways, right? What does this mean? 33% of the trailers arriving positive for PRRS to the plant. What does that mean? Is it that all the loads that were positive were loads with animals that were actively shedding PRRS, or was it that the trailer had not been washed and it was hauling positive pigs before the current load, right? Different ways of looking at it, right? But again, so we're starting with, I shouldn't say a dirty trailer, but already a contaminated trailer. So we're moving some of that material into the plant. Either that, plus or minus a pig that may be actively shedding, right? But then when you look at the trailers that are leaving the plant, there's an increase in every single virus, right? There's an increase in every single virus, and we say, this is kind of like a 40, 50% increase, right? So some people ask me, it's the plant's fault. It's the plant that is doing all this dissemination. I don't think it's the plant's fault, you know? The plant is doing their job. They're just receiving the pigs, they're just harvesting and packing, right? It's just that we are just sending maybe pigs that are shedding, and in some cases, trailers that are dirty, right? So when you look at that, you say, we've got a problem either way, right? But I think it's important to start understanding why. And I think a good portion of the why we know already. But then when we break out that information into seasons, right? This is how that behaves. Depending on the virus, you're going to see a different behavior, right? So PRRS, we can see that, yes, during the winter, we see that there's kind of like a trending, a line that is trending towards a decreasing trend. Now with PDV, the same thing. Yes, we find it easier. Just remember, PD gets shed in the manure, in the feces, way at higher quantities than PRRS. Seneca was kind of surprising to me, and I'm a little bit obsessed with Seneca just because it's just scary, and not every single pig that has Seneca is going to develop vesicles. So we saw a little bit of that in the winter, not much in the spring, and it just exploded in the summer, right? Why? I think there's different theories. And again, PD-COVID follows the same trend as PDV. So season seems to be playing a role in this behavior, right? Now, I'm breaking up that data again, one more layer. This is the most granular data that we have, because I'm showing you the data on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis. And when you look at that, and I've shown this to different companies, we've shown this to USDA, we've shown to other participants, how do we interpret this? And I said, well, I think the message is clear. The risk is always going to be there. Don't think that today there's going to be less PRRS or less PD. No, I think we have to assume. And some people do assume that. Others, they just want to take the risk, and they'll just loop the trailer without washing, right? Again, this is the spike in Seneca that I was talking about. It's kind of interesting. But then when you look at the other three viruses, there's kind of an always underlying level of contamination, right? Whether it's the trailer or the dock. Odds are that if you send a trailer there today, and if you don't take, or if you don't follow certain procedures, you're going to contaminate that trailer, right? The question is what you're going to do after that contamination. And that's what we're trying to understand a bit better with this table, right? So this is kind of a complex table, but I'm just going to focus on the first row. So from the trailers that arrived to the plant with no viruses, how many left with no viruses that we detected in that last compartment? 22 of them. That means that the rest, which is 76% of them that arrived clean, left with a virus, or with 2, or with 3, or with 4. That's kind of an important number to keep in mind. Now, maybe we have missed some, right? There might be some false negatives in here. That's perfectly fine. However, if you look at the second row, from those trailers that arrived with one virus, but left with 2, 3, or 4, hey, we're talking about 60% there. And this is where we're talking about recontamination, right? They may have arrived contaminated with something, but then we added more to the mix, right? Again, there might be also some false negatives in here, right? Just because of the sampling. If you look at that same data virus by virus, you'll see how this behaves, right? Those that arrive negative for PRRS, 54 left positive and 154 left negative. Yes, some of the positive that arrived positive and left positive, but some arrived positive and left negative. What does that mean? Well, we missed it. We missed it, right? The sampling is not perfect. We missed it there. The important thing is, hey, there's a lot of the dynamics that we still need to understand. But the message continues to be the same. Contamination occurs. We already knew that, but now we have some better estimates. Same thing for the other 3 pathogens, right? Now, when we look at those dynamics of which is the pathogen that tends to contaminate more often some of these trailers, we're trying to play with data displays, right? And this is what happens on those trailers on departure. So, in 30 trailers, all those samples were all those trailers left negative, right? In other trailers, we're going to see that in 115 cases, Seneca was found, 161 PD and 200 PD-COVID, 138 PRRS. But how do they interact? Well, those that hit the jackpot in 26 times, so 26 trailers left the plant with the jackpot. In other words, with the 4 viruses, right? 30 of them left with nothing, remember, 26. So we have all these extremes, right? The most famous combination is those that leave the plant with PED and PD-COVID, 42 trailers, right? Out of the 300 and something. Is this surprising? This should not be surprising, just because of the pathogen, how it behaves, right? It just sheds a lot of virus, it contaminates more surfaces at higher titers, if you want to call it that way. So again, we're trying to understand these dynamics. We're also trying to understand what happens after the trailer unloads, right? What's the destination? So we're getting better at collecting that data. We're getting better at cleaning the data. And again, this is quite new that Lucas is putting together. Just to explain to you, the table is from those that tested positive for PRRS, right, on departure, yes, 113. These we're going to go to a truck wash facility. But then 25 would not go to a truck wash facility. They can either go on park and then load, or will go to the same farm and load, or another farm and load. All that is to say that roughly 20% overall from those 4 pathogens, or trailers contaminated with those pathogens, will not go to the truck wash after visiting the slaughter plant. I think we all knew that in some cases, right? We all knew that just because they're going to go back to the same farm. But let me tell you, not all of them go back to the same farm. They may go to a different site. And that's when you wonder, why do we keep seeing PEDV in the finishing barns, right? Again, we keep talking about this, and we say, well, they ask us, but Cesar, what's the level of virus on that trailer, on that sample that you're collecting, right? Is the virus viable? How do I know that that risk is actually a risk, right? Because you're just detecting genetic material, right? So you say, well, we're going to try to get there. But for those that want to see the data a little bit in a granular level, I'm going to show you a graph. If you're not familiar with CT value, the higher the number, the less virus or genetic material that we have in the sample. The lower the number, the more virus. So let's start with that. And for those of you that have gone through statistics but you don't remember, I'm going to show you a whisker, a box plot, just to show you the distribution of those CT values on those trailers. So let's start with PD-COVID. Every dot is a sample, right? Every dot is a sample. And this is just what represents the distribution, right? So here you have the median, right? 30, I'm going to put 33. But look at this area here. We're talking high 20s, mid 20s. That's a lot of virus, right? And when you look at the other pathogens, you say, how am I going to be able to predict what level of contamination my trailer is going to have after visiting the plant? If this is the distribution, right? Again, not that I'm wishing anybody to have issues with pathogens, but now we understand that the risk is there. And there's a lot of virus in those trailers, right? So whether we wash or not, of course, we're going to have that. Everybody's having that conversation that it's, in some cases, is not economically viable. But I think this is where we need to have the conversation. Are we going to play the lottery with this kind of city values? I think that's something that needs to be kept in mind, right? Now, to start wrapping up, as we talk to the drivers and as we start asking them the questions about biosecurity, what do they wear, we start getting into things like this, right? What are they wearing, right? Yes, in 50% of the cases, they're wearing something, right? Whether it's just a normal coverall, whether it's fabric, some rubber boots, and some work gloves, right? Which is perfectly fine, right? Then you have all the different variations, right? And when we presented this at SHIC, Dr. Paul Yeski asked me whether I saw any drivers wearing chaps. That for me something new. I said that's related to those drivers that are hauling cattle, right? So for those of you that didn't know that, and yes, we have people wearing chaps. That means that there's some of these trailers being used also to haul cattle. But that's a different story. Now, we have some of this being used, that's perfect, but still, when we see the drivers getting off and on multiple times while they're unloading pigs, that's something that needs to be fine-tuned. And we ask them in some occasions, have you received any of this training? Have you received any of these non-negotiables? And in the majority of the cases, they haven't been trained. It's not their fault. Now, when we asked, in the last group of drivers, or a few groups of drivers, we have been asking them, why are you using what you're using, right? Those questions are hard to ask because, especially those that understand the social aspect, I mean, social sciences are complicated. And in epidemiology, you do not want to be inducing the answer, right? So we have to be careful with how we ask it. But anyway, when we ask them, can you tell us what's the reason why you're using what you're using? Only 2 of the drivers said that they're using that because of biosecurity reasons. Is that surprising? I think to me it is, because in some cases you would assume you must have received some sort of training, right? But look at it. It's basically this. We have no reason. We have the reason of I don't want to get dirty, I don't want to get smelly, right? Comfort, it's too cold. We have a huge opportunity here to just remind them or train them or provide that message, right? That you're doing this just to avoid pathogen transfer, right? So I think that's a highlighting thing to remember. Few other findings as I wrap up. Good thing is that we only found American, or what we call, the American version of PRRS in the United States, right? So there's no European strain. Good thing that we haven't found TGE in all this, as we do the sampling, because this sampling is not representative only for these trailers. I think it's representative for that harvest plant, right? We also know that pretty much in half of those loads, there's always going to be, a downer pig, right? That they need to get on the trailer, bring a sled, bring the pig out. So we know that there's going to be always, it's not a unidirectional flow. We're always going to have plant employees coming onto that trailer with a sled. So, that can help with contamination. There's no other way to get it done, to be honest, right? You have to move that pig out of the way. Then almost 45% of those loads, we have seen the driver getting off for multiple reasons. One is to call or ask people for help, or another one is just because they're just waiting, because they're recounting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is something we could try to avoid, right? Just have them stay on the trailer, right? Let's not move more of that wood shaving material back and forth, right? And then the last one is what I just mentioned earlier. A fifth of those trailers may be hauling cattle at a given point, right? What we do know is that not necessarily there's a truck wash in between those two species, right? They might be just hauling the next species without washing that trailer. Is that a risk? Of course that's a risk. We never know what can be moved from species to species, right? So a few messages for you to take home with. The risk is there. I think the risk is there. At some point, some people thought the risk is low. Actually, the risk is pretty high. I think it's pretty high and it's there, so we're getting good data. But I think we have opportunities at different levels, right? Of course, one that we keep thinking about is how can we try to reduce or avoid any kind of cases in the finishing population, right? If we don't stop that, then as soon as we put those pegs on the trailer, we're just going to feed the plant with more viruses, right? If you want to call it that way. The other one is we can do little things at the plant. You know, hey, let's just have our drivers wear some plastic booties and try to avoid transferring more material to your trailers, right? The less viruses or the amount of viruses that we put on that trailer, the easier it is for them to go through the truck wash and remove it, right? I think this is another conversation that has been going on for a while. How are we going to be able to make sure that we wash every single trailer? I know that's easy to say, hard to do. And then I think we may have to go and revisit in some cases how to reduce the number of DOAs or non-ambulatory. I know that during the summer we're going to have a bit more, but there's sometimes that we see in some days that it's not that hot, humidity is low, we see more of these, right? Doesn't matter whether the distance is short or long, we still see some of that. So again, maybe that's another opportunity for us to avoid plant employees getting on the trailer. So with that, I just want to acknowledge the plant that is collaborating with us, the drivers, which in some cases are producers as well, but also for sharing with us their experience, their thoughts. The UMN VDL team for all the effort, because we just give them lots of samples and they're doing a beautiful job. Of course, our funding agencies, SHIC plays a major role in this, but also the Swine Disease Eradication Center, and I have to mention AESV, who gave us supplementary monies to complete the dog testing, but also the viability PCR that will happen in the next few weeks, few months, right? And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Corzo. So we'll open it up. We have time for about one or two questions.
Hi, so obviously we know that things can be spread through the trailers, right? And we can pick it up at the plants. Any thoughts of looking and doing some testing on the tractors or the drivers themselves, which are definitely more difficult to clean and disinfect, but to make the case to create an emphasis there?
That's a great question, Lina, and we would have loved to do that. The thing is that as you keep adding more surfaces, the budget just blows up. But I'm not saying that we don't want to do it. I'm saying that we want to do it. We just need to get some more monies to try to pair those. I'll use your question to tell you that there's been a handful of drivers very concerned with, is my tractor clean, right? So we have collected a few swabs. I mean, we have tested them. We don't find much except for maybe PDCOV or PEDV, right? That's at the tractor level. Now we have done a few, the boot box, where they just put in the boots and the coveralls. Oh, you can see the PEDV and the PDCOV in there, right? So I think there's opportunities there as well, right? Now when we ask them how often do you clean your tractor, they say pretty much all of them. They'll say at least weekly, maybe every other week, but they have something clear, and it's I do not go into the tractor, into the cab with dirty shoes. That helps, right? I think that helps, right? When I looked at some of those during the winter, I said, oh, this is a different story, right? So I think we have challenges in there that we need to, but hey, that's a good question. Opportunities.
Nice presentation. One quick question. What was your process for actually collecting the samples on the trailers? Did you swab basically the whole trailer, certain sections of the trailer? Elaborate.
So I'm going to use this table. So as the trailer backs up, And once the driver has said, okay, I'm happy to help, we just kneel down. We have 4 layers of gloves. We peel the first one off. As the baggies are open, we stick our hand in there, grab the Swiffer. We rub the dog first. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the words. The dog first, put it back in, seal it. The other bag is also somewhat open. We peel again the second layer, and we do only the last compartment, right? We would have loved to collect samples from this, top deck, corners, front, but then there's a safety concern, right? We even thought about using broomsticks or something that we can just go and say, we could do it, but during the winter in those 20 below days, that would be hard to do. And especially because in some cases, those corners are gonna be frozen, right? But that was the best way for us to get it done quickly and get out of the way, right? Especially in the hot days. Especially in the hot days, because they just wanna get those pigs out of there as soon as possible. So that's how we're doing it. Yep.
How long after the trailer was washed and disinfected were the samples taken? I came in a little late, I'm sorry. And I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, we do not have that information. We do not have that information because we just asked them, hey, from this load of pigs, was that trailer washed and disinfected? They say yes, no. What we're asking is how much you're paying for the wash, just to get a feel for, was it just a flush or was it a proper wash and a tad, as they go through that? But
No, my question was, when the samples were taken, was that 10 minutes, an hour, 4 hours after the trailer was completed?
we don't know. We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, because we don't know. We just asked them, did you wash or not? And that's it. We don't go.
It just so happens that I've ridden in a trailer to prove a point after they've been done, and I've ridden in 4 of them, and they were spitting. There were whatever was still in there, in edges and corners, flexing on the road in the trailer, it was still spitting out organics
Yep,
inside after it was done.
It doesn't surprise me. Yep.
Great. In the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our next presenter. So please help me thank Dr. Corzo for that presentation.
Thank you.